Yes, 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 yes. It is, I was going to say, no, it is Saturday today. It's Saturday. What's going on, everybody? Saturday, June the 1st, 2024, 7:12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is episode 262 of Mcrae Live. My name's Dave Mcrae, coming to you live from the Voiceman Studios in Toronto, Canada. And tonight, we are talking Godzilla -1. Woo! Do it one more time! Have you seen Godzilla -1? It finally came to Netflix. It finally came to the rest of the world. I watched it this afternoon. I'm a big Godzilla fan. I've got thoughts. I want to talk about Godzilla -1. Let's talk about it tonight. We'll see who rolls on in. It's Saturday. Maybe nobody. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 262 of Mcrae Live. My name is Dave Mcrae, and we're talking Godzilla -1. I'm excited to talk about this movie. So I am a big Godzilla fan. For those of you that may not know, I am. Obviously, but here's the thing. Let me give you as quick as I possibly can, sort of history, Dave Mcrae with Godzilla. So I'm a big Godzilla fan, but I'm not a huge fan. Like, there are some Godzilla fans that are just doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Hang on a sec. Are we still live? We're still live, right? I'm getting some notifications from OBS, but I believe we are still live. Yes, we are still live. We're still live, right? We're here. Hello, hello. We are here. Right? We're still good. I think I'm still alive. Yeah. What's good? Yeah. The chat room will let me know. Looks like I am. So, you know, there are a lot of Godzilla movies out there. A lot of Godzilla movies. And there are people that love everyone. It doesn't matter, right? The cheesy movies, the serious movies. Thank you, everybody. CM says, yes, I am. Thank you, Chris. And that's great. And there are some of those 60s, 70s Godzilla movies, more of the cheesier ones, that I do like. I mean, I do. I mean, you know, some nostalgia there. Obviously, as a young boy growing up through the 1980s, those were fairly recent Godzilla movies that I was watching from the 70s, right? However, I much prefer, and I've always preferred, my Godzilla movies to be taken seriously. As seriously as you possibly can, with a giant lizard attacking Tokyo, if you know what I mean. And so there's like cheesy Godzilla movies, like some of the, if you know what I'm talking about. And then there's, you know, like some pretty serious ones. I mean, obviously the original 1954 Godzilla was very serious, and of course had a very, very serious theme around it. Obviously all about, you know, there's a lot of cinematic language, a lot of symbolism, a lot of layers to that movie, all about sort of, you know, well, I mean, it was really kind of a Japanese film about sort of what can happen when, you know, nuclear war and bombs and shit. And it was really kind of like, you know, taking a mirror to the Americans and kind of, you know what I'm saying? And this Godzilla is sort of the manifestation of what happened as the result of, you know, it was a very serious film. And it didn't, I mean, obviously Godzilla in the movie, it's 1954 and it's very dated. Okay. It's not quite like watching the 1933 King Kong, but it's kind of in that same vein because it's 1954. Okay. Fair enough. Then there was the American version of that film in 1956 called Godzilla King of the Monsters, starring Raymond Burr. Raymond Burr, good old, what's his face? Not Matlock, Perry Mason. Good old Perry Mason. No, Perry Mason. Yeah, Perry Mason. Matlock was Andy Griffith. And that was basically the Godzilla film from 1954, although a lot of the themes were kind of toned down a little bit because it wasn't, didn't favor the American audiences. And although there was still some of that there, and Raymond Burr, of course, played a man by the name of Steve Martin, funny enough. And, and so there's that version. And then, of course, there's all the cheesy Godzilla movies in between, and, Godzilla versus Megalon, Godzilla versus King Ghidorah or King Ghidorah, and then you have like Mothra and like Son of Godzilla and all these there's films where like they talk and it's crazy. It's crazy. Jet Jaguar. Remember Jet Jaguar? Anyway, a whole plethora of Godzilla movies. And I did enjoy some of those cheesy Godzilla movies as a kid. I did. But I'm really I've always been appreciative of the more serious takes. And so when Godzilla 1985 came out, I have a Godzilla 1985 poster at the end of my hallway down here. And that is the American version of the 1984 film, The Return of Godzilla, I believe it's called. And so again, it's the same movie. They just shot some American scenes with Raymond Burr, so it can be a sequel to the 1956 Godzilla movie, which is really the same movie as the 54 film, but it's the American version. Hopefully you're following me here. If you're not and you're completely lost, well, there's not much I can tell you. But if you're a Godzilla fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So Godzilla 1985 was the first Godzilla movie I ever saw in the movie theater. My dad took me to see it. And now again, it's the 1980s. If you watch it now, especially if you're a young chap today and you watch it today, you might find a little bit of it, cheesy or whatever. It's very 80s, but it's way more serious than any of the Godzilla movies that had preceded it. And now it's also not the same timeline, all that kind of stuff, right? But it's way more serious, and Godzilla looks great. It's a guy in a suit mixed with animatronics. But still to this day, I think the Godzilla in Godzilla 1985 looks fucking spectacular. Still to this day. And that took itself seriously. Then there was the 1988 Roland Emmerich film. And then, of course, there was Godzilla 2000 or whatever it was, and Godzilla Final Wars, and there was all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the Monsterverse, Gareth Edwards' Godzilla and all that. Now, my favorite of the Monsterverse is actually Godzilla King of the Monsters. I actually quite like that movie a lot. And so I just wanted to kind of preface this by giving you sort of, where I am with my Godzilla love. And so I've always appreciated a more serious take, like more serious, not so cheesy. Although I do get some enjoyment out of Godzilla fighting monsters or protecting Earth or, fighting King Kong, whatever. It wouldn't be my first choice. It wouldn't be my first choice. Just who I am. Just who I am. I much just prefer Godzilla on his own. So when Godzilla -1 came out and it was getting all sorts of rave reviews, I was like, really? And people were talking about it's got heart. It's got passion. It is a character-driven film rather than a plot-driven film. I was like, really? Okay. I'm liking this. And so, of course, I didn't go to the theater to see it when it made its limited run. And I've been waiting for it to come to streaming, and now it has. So I sat down today and I watched it, and I loved it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, I do have some things as I was watching. I was like, oh, I probably would have done this or, would have done that. So big spoiler alert. I guess, do I have my little spoiler button still here? Do I? Damn it, it's not there. Oh, wait. Hang on. Maybe I still do have it. Hang on. Let me put it up here. Is it still there? No, it doesn't look like it. No, I guess I deleted it. Anyway, I used to have a spoiler button that would, or not a button, but a little badge that would pop up. Anyway, I'm going to be talking spoilers, obviously, because you can't talk. I don't like fucking dancing around shit. And I'm not a movie reviewer, so I don't have to put up like a non-spoiler review and then kind of a semi-spoiler review and then a full spoiler. I don't have to do that shit. I can just fucking spoil the shit out of everything. So here's the thing. Okay. I love this movie. I thought it was great. As far as Godzilla movies go, right? I mean, as far as Japanese Godzilla movies go, this is fantastic. I mean, it's a fantastic movie anyway, but I'm just saying, like, it's it might not have that Hollywood polish or that Hollywood sheen or that Hollywood blah, blah, blah to it. You know what I'm saying? But it is terrific. And the budget on this movie was like, I think it was under 20 million or something like, no, was it 20 million? Was it 60? I don't know. It was low, low in, you know, relatively speaking. The effects I think were fantastic, especially for the budget. I thought Godzilla looked great. And I thought the character development and the story was really good about this kamikaze pilot who basically was like, no, I'm not fucking doing this. Like, this is bullshit. This is dog shit. I want to live. I want to live. And of course he flies his plane to that island and he fakes there being something wrong with the plane. And they're all like, oh, what's going on? This doesn't make any sense. And, but of course, the things that he saw and the guilt that he feels, although he knows he did the right thing out of principle, he still feels extraordinarily guilty that he did that because of duty to country, duty to the war. There are friends of his, pilots, fellow kamikazes that sacrificed themselves, you know, in the war, and he didn't do that. And he's probably struggling with, you know, courage and am I a bad person? Am I a coward? Like all these things that he's feeling before he even meets Godzilla. And then he gets to the island, right? And, you know, and they're like, oh, there's something wrong here, you know? And then of course, in the middle of the night, Godzilla shows up. Now, I will say that when Godzilla showed up, I was surprised that he showed up that early. I was like, oh, already. Oh, okay. We're here. We're in this. We're doing this. Okay. And it took me about 30 seconds to be like, oh, okay, we're doing this. But okay, fine. We're doing this, right? And we did it. I personally think, and this is just me, if I was behind the camera, if I was directing the film, I wouldn't have shown Godzilla. I would have shown maybe little bits and pieces of him. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe you see his foot, maybe it's raining, so it's very dark. Maybe the power goes out on the island or something. So maybe you just see Godzilla in the illumination of the lightning or something like that, like glimpses of him, you know, that kind of thing. So you get a sense of him. Do you know what I mean? But you don't actually see him. That's probably how I would have handled his introduction, just to kind of build that suspense even more so that the first time we do see him is in the ocean when they're all on the boat and he has some sort of grand entrance coming out of the water or something like that. I could have seen myself taking that creative route as I was watching that scene play out. That's what I was thinking of. I was like, oh, like it was totally fine the way they did it. I just wasn't expecting him so soon. And I kind of I was really into sort of the story they were laying out. And I kind of wanted to sit with that for a bit, build that suspense a bit more, you know, before I got a really good look at Godzilla. Didn't ruin the movie, was totally fine. You could perceive that as a nitpick if you wanted to, but I just was like, oh, this is okay. But if I was behind the camera, if I was directing the movie, I could see myself doing that. I could see myself saying, hey, why don't we do it this way? So the audience gets a sense of him. Like very kind of like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park, but you don't see you don't really see him, but it's raining like that. Like it's a very T-Rex moment. You know what I mean? It's raining. Maybe you see, you know, Godzilla's foot, you see his tail, you see them reacting to him. They see him like, oh my God, you know, in the light, maybe there's a quick flash and you see kind of his head a little bit. You know what I mean? Just things like that. I think that would have been really cool. But anyway, that aside, he looked great. During that scene, I was like, wow. I knew that he was big, but I knew that he wasn't as, like, I could tell, oh, they're going to make him bigger later on. He was still gigantic. And of course, everything that, I forget the character's name now. Let me just go to IMDb here. I'm probably not going to be able to pronounce it in Japanese. So I'm not going to pretend to try. Yeah. Well, we'll just say, you know, our lead. Okay. We'll call him our lead. I just want to respect the Japanese name because I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. But you know, the lead of the film, right? Our kamikaze pilot. You know, he was dealing with shit, man. And he, you know, you could say he chickened out. You could say he was a coward, but he just was so emotional and dealing with shit. And then of course, was it his fault? No, I don't think it was his fault. I mean, would that gun have killed Godzilla? Would he been able to kill him had he fired on him anyway? No. So, but there was a lot of animosity and resentment from the mechanics, especially that lead, mechanic, when he found out that this is a kamikaze pilot who had, basically chickened out, right? So he blamed him for the deaths of everybody on the island. And but in reality, was it his fault? Not really, but that was just another layer, right? Another piece of guilt that he was feeling. So there's all these layers, this great story about this pilot and what he's struggling with. And one of my favorite lines in the movie is later in the film, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't know if I'm going to get it verbatim, but he said something to the effect of, the war in me is still going. Like the war for me is not over. And that was such a great line. It was such a great line because of the PTSD and everything that he was feeling. And when he said that, it was already like 1947 or 1948. So we're already like 3 years removed from, when the war ended. And, we forget, like, well, I don't know if we forget, but, we forget that, it was a very controversial decision to drop those atomic bombs on Japan in 1945. And there are historians and those that believe that it was unnecessary, that the Japanese would have surrendered without it. Now, I don't want to get into a whole political debate here, but I'm just saying if you do your due diligence and your research, in retrospect, there are those that feel that it may have been unnecessary, despite those that feel it was. And, we forget that, it was dropped on innocent people. There are some out there, of course, it depends on what side you're on, but there are some that, point to that as, kind of a terrorist attack in some ways, right? You look at, thousands and thousands of innocent people died, and they knew it. They knew it. They dropped it right in the middle. It would be like dropping an atomic bomb right in the middle of, Toronto. Just, here you go. You know what I mean? And so it was, again, I don't want to get into a whole debate about this, but I'm just saying, if and it's not like I'm a World War II buff, but I do know a little bit about sort of, there's some interesting discussions to be had on both sides, but nonetheless, it did force, of course, the Japanese to surrender, which inevitably ended the war. But just the watching it from that, because that is what the 1954 film was really about in a lot of ways. There was a lot of that, like what can the residual effects of nuclear war create? And, there was this message about how, yes, now this is a bit different. It didn't quite go in that direction totally, but that 1954 film was really all about that. Was, okay, you may have ended the war, but you created something else. You created this monster, and essentially that was Godzilla. And, it was sort of like, that was an analogy or whatever it is. But anyway, I digress. But I thought the performance, again, theatrical. Some might perceive the performances to be a little over the top, but that is, that's the difference between cinema around the world, right? You have Bollywood, you have Hollywood, you have Japanese cinema, South Korean, China, Japanese, sometimes the performances may seem to us maybe a little theatrical, but I thought they were great, and I thought the characters were really cool, and I thought the story was really great. And I liked that we spent a lot of time with them. I loved that this was not Godzilla versus Kong. I love that this was not Godzilla X Kong. I haven't seen it yet, but fuck, it looks like the PS5 game threw up all over my fucking, living room. I like this more grounded, real approach. I liked spending time with this couple, if you will, who they're not really a couple now. I'm sure they are, right? If you've watched the movie, but sort of circumstances and the war and everything that happened, and this baby that's not even theirs. I mean, it's an orphan, right? It's growing up thinking that it's a mother and father. Like, I really like that. And the PTSD and the stuff that he was dealing with. And then he was faced with a decision, of what he needed to do to end the war in his mind, to end the guilt and the shame and the remorse and the sadness and the depression every day, day after day after day that he is feeling. And then, of course, when our lead actress there, again, I forget her name. I don't want to butcher it. But when she passed, we thought she passed, right? I thought that was terrific. And in a lot of ways, there's two ways you could have done this. You could have kept her dead, and you could have actually had him sacrifice himself by flying into Godzilla's mouth. Now, maybe, and I thought that's what they were going to do. I thought they were going to do that. And that maybe if they were going to do a sequel to Godzilla -1, which I don't see how you don't, it was a huge success all over the world, that the sequel could be set maybe 25 years later, and you follow that little girl who's now grown up, and she's now, I guess you could still do that, but her parents died in the first war with Godzilla, right? Her mother was killed in that atomic breath, which was, oh my God. It was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. And, but her mother, in quotes, because obviously it's not her mother, but her mom, was killed. Her father sacrificed himself, right? He's a fucking war hero. He's gone from this, even though he, ejected out of the plane, he still went from dud to stud. But I'm just saying, like, that would have been interesting if they had done it that way. And maybe 25 years later, Godzilla -2 or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what you want to call it. We're following her, and then she's faced with Godzilla returning. And people are almost looking to her because of who she was at that time period and all that, that might be interesting. And they could still do that. I don't know what they're going to do, or even if they are going to do a sequel, and what the story will be. But I thought as the movie was going along, I thought, I wonder if they're going to, because I was convinced that she was dead. I was like, and I would have been okay with that, right? Sometimes to give the story weight and to give the story bottom, sometimes that's real life, man. And listen, that's like, that is almost what he needed to push himself over the edge. He had her photograph in the plane. I'm going to do this for her, for my country, for the, all this kind of stuff. And it totally would have worked. It totally would have worked. However, they decided to go with a little more of a little more, maybe, I don't say traditional, but a little more happier ending, I guess, where she actually made it out and nobody knew that. Or they didn't know that, but she actually survived and she was in a hospital. And then I do like, though, I will say, and I thought that's what was going to happen when the mechanic guy was, I know I should know their names, but my apologies. When the mechanic guy was fixing up that plane and he said, and another thing, and then they cut away. It was clearly communicated that was of importance, and there was something he said there that was going to mean something later. And sure enough, it was the ejection seat. And I really did like that cutaway, later on when they showed him saying, live. Like, basically, you deserve to live. You don't deserve this. Like I was wrong to blame you for everything. Do you know what I mean? Like that's, he didn't say that verbatim, but that is what that means. Live. I want you to live. You deserve to live. You don't deserve this any more than I do. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't your fault. Like, you know what I'm saying? I really, really like that. That is nice. I will say that is nice. And of course you can't have that without him ejecting. You can't have that payoff without him ejecting. So I thought that was nice, but when and I love too, when they're on the ocean and Godzilla's about to give that atomic breath, one last time or one more time, and they just drop the sound out altogether. And they're just showing everybody like waiting to be killed. I thought that was great. Their hair blowing in the wind and they're just sitting there, you know what I mean? Like, holy fuck, this is it. And I thought That would have been cool. That would have been cool. That would have been cool if he just was like, whew. Another thing I like too is that the atomic breath, I can't remember if this happened on land, but certainly I think the 2 times on the water, I think the atomic breath, when he fires the atomic breath, I like how you see almost like a nuclear, like a mushroom cloud after the fact and everything. I really like that. That's really cool because Godzilla isn't like, for those of you that may not know, the reason why Godzilla is nuclear, you got to go back to the original 1954 film and all of sort of the subtext and everything all around, the 2 nuclear bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and all what that means and the fallout of that. And I mean, that is why Godzilla is nuclear. Okay. And that's why he can breathe atomic breath and all that kind of stuff. There's specific, now this Godzilla -1 and other films over the years have sort of like Godzilla -1 is basically another remake. It's another reboot. Godzilla's been rebooted many times. Even Toho has done it many times. But its inception, why he was like that is that's why the Cliff Notes version. And so, yeah, I mean, just seeing his atomic breath. I will say something that was a bit different though, and I get it, like it works for the story. When they said that when he breathes his atomic breath, he needs to recharge. Like he's got to wait like 10 minutes before, he can go again. It's kind of like us guys when we have orgasms. You know what I mean? It's like, we can't, ladies, I mean, that's amazing that you can like, we can't do it. We can't do it. I mean, we can't do it. Like we need time. We need just, can you give us 10? Just give us 10. Just give us 10 and then we'll be ready to rock, baby. And so now, but in previous Godzilla movies, that wasn't always the case. There's many Godzilla movies where he just breathes fire at will. It doesn't fucking matter. And so I was kind of like, oh, okay, sure, okay. I get it. Like it helps sort of, because if he could breathe at will in this movie, if he could breathe fire at will in this movie, there'd be nobody alive. It would just be ridiculous. It would be ridiculous. Although I kind of want to watch that movie. So I do understand. Why they kind of maybe need a little bit of that buffer. So not everybody's completely annihilated. But I thought the atomic breath looked great. I thought the design of Godzilla was really great. And I love the design from the Monsterverse. Although I'm not a big fan of most of the Monsterverse movies. My favorite is still, like I said, Godzilla, King of the Monsters. I do love the design of Godzilla in the Monsterverse. I quite like that a lot. And I quite like his design in this movie as well. Very similar. Like, there's similarities. And I quite like it. And then, of course, I was waiting for the Godzilla theme. Dun, 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 dun. Yes, baby. Goosebumps. I got goosebumps. I'm sitting on my couch. I'm watching this. I got goosebumps because it's classic. I mean, it's legendary, really. I mean, it's in almost every Godzilla movie. It's a classic theme. And when that started to play, I was like, oh yeah, baby. You know what I mean? And I got goosebumps. I did. I was like, yes. Cause it's like one of those, if you're a Godzilla fan, and I don't pretend to be the world's foremost Godzilla expert, but I am a Godzilla fan. I grew up with the movies. And if you're a Godzilla fan, it is like the Halloween theme to Godzilla. It's like the Star Wars theme to Star Wars. You know what I mean? If you watch a Godzilla movie, especially, ones that are really great, and you hear, it's like, here we go, baby. And it's very old school. Like, that's very much old, like that boom, 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 boom. Like, that's old school monster, like 1950s monster movies. You know what I mean? So to hear that in modern day films is, obviously it's got a modern, orchestra behind it and everything, but it's still very old school, so it's really cool, you know what I mean? To hear it in such, against the backdrop of such modern production value. It's really, really cool. So I loved that. I loved when he attacked the city, of course, and the train, and our lead actress, of course, hanging from the train and stuff. I thought that was great. There's a couple of similar shots in that movie that reminded me of a bit of Godzilla 1985. And, but yeah, just overall, like real, again, like some of the acting, obviously it's a Japanese film, and some Japanese films, not all, but some, especially Godzilla movies, some of the acting, not all of it, but some of the acting can be a little theatrical. But overall, I thought they did a tremendous job. I think this is, like, I don't know if I'd go as far as to say it's my favorite Godzilla movie, but it's like, yeah, like it's top 3 for me. Like, my favorite Godzilla movies are, and this is purely nostalgic, like my favorite Godzilla movie will probably always forever be Godzilla 1985. Because it's just, that's, you know, nostalgia, and it's a great Godzilla movie, you know, and I do quite like Godzilla, King of the Monsters, like I said, quite like that film. There's a couple of the 70s cheesier Godzilla movies I quite like. The one where he faces Megalon, I think that's the one with Jet Jaguar. The one where he faces King Ghidorah is, I believe, the correct pronunciation, but we like to say King Ghidorah. That's the 3-headed dragon who was in Godzilla, King of the Monsters. That's kind of, I always kind of perceive, this might be a bit different depending on the Godzilla fan you ask, but I almost kind of think of King Ghidorah or King Ghidorah as like Godzilla's arch nemesis. Although some people might like to say King Kong, but I don't really feel that way at all. Like, I know it's kind of fun to put, because King Kong is an American creation. So to put Kong and Godzilla in a movie together can be fun. But to me, Godzilla's sort of arch nemesis is King Ghidorah, really. I mean, that's kind of how I've always seen it. So when I saw like that 3-headed sort of like, you know, almost hieroglyph or whatever it was in Godzilla, King of the Monsters, I was like, oh no, yes, baby. You know what I'm saying? And he was beautifully done in that film. Beautifully done in that film. And, but anyway, like, this is probably, like, it's right there. Like, it's, I'll just go as far as to say it's my favorite Godzilla movie right now. For sure. Like, it is, it was so well done. It won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. I'd have to see who it was nominated against. Listen, you know, okay, so did it deserve the Oscar for Best Visual Effects? Sure. I think there's a lot going on there that may have made its decision. And I think part of that would have been its budget. Let me just see what the budget was. Oh, here we go. It's probably on IMDb. Budget. Yeah, $15 million. Holy fuck. $15 million. So I was right when I said 16 earlier. 15 million US. So when you look at what they were able to create for $15 million US, it's remarkable. Now, like, I don't know if people were asking for favors or like people were not taking overtime or what the fuck was going on. But the visual effects in that movie, like, remember, that's the production budget. $15 million is the production budget. And so, yeah, like when you look at the movie as a whole, does it come across as a movie that should be nominated for Best Visual Effects at the Oscars? No, probably not. Not because the effects are bad. They're not bad. In any way, shape, or form, they're not bad. It's just when we think about the movies that are usually nominated for Best Visual Effects, right? Star Wars, you know, Lord of the Rings, Marvel, Transformer, you know what I'm saying? You know, there's so much going on, right? But I really think what they were able to do with this movie on a $15 million budget and create that? Oh, that's, I mean, it's like, it's fucking, and it just goes to show you. It goes to show, look, you know, I've said this many times, and obviously I'm speaking generally here, but that is why, like, obviously, yeah, it's not necessarily all about how much money you have. It's about where that money is allocated, right? You can have a movie that costs $50 million that looks like it costs $200 million because where you chose to allocate that movie. You can also have a movie that costs, you know, I don't know, $50 million that looks like it should have, that costs like $5, right? Like, what the hell did you do? Oh, well, that's because we spent most of that on catering and our lead actor and, you know, air flights and hotels and all that kind of stuff, right? So, you know, it all depends on where you allocate it, right? Do you know what I mean? So it like, this was this was brilliantly done. And I thought Godzilla, I thought he looked great. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie a lot. And I liked the story. I liked that we spent time with the characters. You know, there were some people that reached out to me and said, I didn't like it because Godzilla wasn't on screen enough. And I'm like, yeah, I respect your opinion. I respect your views, but man, I just categorically disagree, fundamentally disagree. You know, I don't believe that every Godzilla movie or monster movie's gotta be all, you know what I'm saying? And I think American audiences are so used to that Hollywood dumbing down, you know, and watching Godzilla standing on a fucking aircraft carrier, you know what I'm saying? And those movies can be fun. They can be fun, but they are like brain fart cotton candy. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's a different kind of movie. It's a different kind of movie. When you watch Godzilla -1, you know, or even Godzilla 1985. You know, again, it's very 80s, so you got to take that into consideration. But even that movie, or even the original 1954 film, you know, there's heart, there's character, I like that kind of thing. Like, it's like Jaws. You know, like Jaws is a character-driven film. It's not a plot-driven film in any way, shape, or form. It is a character-driven film. And when you have great I'm not comparing Jaws to Godzilla -1. I'm just talking about them in principle. You know, when you have Jaws, which was such a character-driven piece, great characters, it doesn't matter that the shark is not on screen because you're so emotionally invested in these characters and you want to spend time with them and figure out what they're saying. And so that when shit hits the fan later on in the movie, you're like, oh fuck, oh my God, oh they fuck. I mean, I stand to be corrected, but I believe Jaws, the shark, Bruce, was on screen. Now, obviously we know why, because it was, you know, happenstance. It was a happy accident. It wasn't originally planned this way. We knew that Bruce was going to be on screen a lot more. But obviously they were having issues with the salt water and the mechanics and all that kind of stuff. So they had to improvise and it turned out great. It actually worked better because you didn't see it, right? More that theater of the mind. But the shark itself is on, and I still think the shark today, there's a couple of shots where maybe, you know, it's a bit dated, but I still think the shark today in Jaws looks fantastic. I don't know if that is me looking through rose-colored glasses because I'm 45 and I grew up with this movie and it's my nostalgia talking. I don't know, but I still think the fucking shark in Jaws, the first Jaws, not Jaws 3, the first Jaws, I still think the shark today looks fucking great. And I think it is because they used it minimally. You know what I'm saying? And mixed in with, you know, shots of real sharks. Anyway, we're not talking about Jaws, but I'm just saying, the shark in Jaws was on screen, like actually on screen for something like a total of like 4 minutes. And it was something like that. And you don't actually see the shark in its entirety until like something like 84 minutes or 85 minutes into the movie or something. Like you see the fin, of course, earlier. You see kind of glimpses of it earlier. But I mean like seeing it, which would have been maybe, you know, come on down here and chump some of this shit. That's probably what they're taught. That's got to be like at least almost an hour and a half into the movie. And so, like, I like that kind of stuff. And that's what this was. That's what Gareth Edwards tried to do with Godzilla 2014. The problem with that movie, the problem I have with that movie is, funny enough, not the little screen time that Godzilla has. The problem I have with that movie is that I don't think the characters are interesting enough when you're away from Godzilla. And so, you know, if you're going to do the Jaws thing, which I don't really see that here, although you could draw parallels, you got to have a great story and great characters to go along with it. And that's what Godzilla -1 has. And so I didn't care that, you know, I saw Godzilla at the beginning of the movie and then the next 20 minutes were with this family and the baby. And I didn't care because I was so invested into this guy and into, oh, what's going to happen? Oh my God. So they're not like, oh my God, this baby's not even hers. Oh my God, that's interesting. What's going to happen? Oh, this is fast. Oh yeah, he's dealing with this PTSD. Oh yeah. What's going to happen? Oh, they're going to go out. Oh, they got to get the mines out of and he's still thinking about this monster and Godzilla. I'm invested. And so when it came time at the very end, you know, that's what it's all about, right? Like that's, although, like I said, there have been a few Godzilla movies over the years where they have had that, but generally speaking, traditionally, when the average movie, and this is what's frustrating as a Godzilla fan, and it's fair, I totally get it, when the average movie fan, who's maybe not quite a Godzilla fan, but knows Godzilla, thinks of Godzilla, they will probably think of those cheesy 60s, 70s Godzilla movies where, you know, Godzilla is like flying down a fucking road on his tail, right? You've seen those clips where he's just like, you know, and he's like, you know, and he's doing this, and it clearly is a guy in a suit. You know, and then if you watch some of the later Godzilla movies with the guy in the suit, it's the same suit they've used over the years. And you can tell the suit's kind of falling apart because like his skin's like peeling off. I mean, it's just, and some of the stories are interesting, but you know, it's just, they're cheesy and you know what I'm saying? And that's generally, not that there aren't redeeming qualities, but that's generally what people think of when they think of Godzilla, right? And I like it that Toho, again, although I'm not a big fan of most of the MonsterVerse movies, I will give credit where credit is due and say at least they've tried to kind of mature it a little bit, you know, bring it kind of, you know, into the 21st century and kind of give it a bit of grit, a bit of, you know, bottom. And I love what Toho has done here with Godzilla -1. I think it's better. Like, I still really like Godzilla King of the Monsters. I think it's that nice balance between Godzilla and one-dimensional characters. I think if you're going to do that kind of a movie, I think Godzilla King of the Monsters should be your example of that. But I thought Godzilla -1 was a terrific, more mature take. You know, again, as mature as you can get with Godzilla. And I'm very curious to see where they're going to go with, if they do a part 2, which I'm assuming they will. I mean, how can you not, right? I mean, it's done so well all over the world. And it will continue to do well in rentals and 4K sales and Blu-rays, I'm assuming. And I don't know what Netflix paid for the streaming rights, but probably a pretty penny. And so yeah, they've got to be doing another one. But what is the story? What is the story? Anyways, folks, yeah, those are my general thoughts on Godzilla -1. Love the story, love the heart, love the way he looked. Atomic breath, some of the destruction is great when he gets to land. And I love the story. And I thought the effects looked great. The cinematography was great. The theme, the Godzilla theme, you know, it was all around a really good Godzilla movie. Very classy, very well done, a lot of heart, and it just looked awesome. So I'm very happy with it. Anyways, let's jump over to the chat room and see what all of you are saying now. I know some super chats did come in, so let me get some of these here and see what you are saying. Okay. We're starting off with Edward Nito, my Godzilla brother from another mother, says, I've been anticipating this. The standalone Godzilla movies are my favorite ones. I could not agree more. Listen, there's always fun to be had when Godzilla fights another monster or fights Kong. Sure, but I much prefer just Godzilla on his own. And when Godzilla is on his own, he's usually a bad guy, which is kind of what I also like about Godzilla King of the Monsters, is that he's a good guy. You know, a good guy, you know what I mean? But he's a good guy for all intents and purposes. And the standalone Godzilla movies, he tends to be a bad guy, but I still do like them better. Flet's Movie and Pop Culture just became a member. Thank you, Flet. Appreciate that. Josh McKenna sends in $1.99, says, I joined your Black Christmas Facebook group page. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. Yeah, folks, let me put that into the chat, actually. I created a Facebook page. Now, there's a Facebook page for It's Me Billy Chapter 2, and there's a Facebook page for It's Me Billy, I should say, for Chapter 1 and 2, which I hope you guys join if you have Facebook. But I also created a 50th anniversary Facebook page for Black Christmas. So if you're a Black Christmas fan and you want to share, and it's a group page, so you guys can post. You can post memories, photos, memes, reviews, of course, tailored to Black Christmas, and It's Me Billy and all that kind of stuff. But if you want to join, if you have Facebook and you want to join, feel free to join via that link there. We have nearly 100 people already, and I thought I would create a 50th anniversary Facebook page for Black Christmas. There will be cross promotion there, of course, with Billy and all that kind of stuff. So, but it's for you guys, really. It's for you guys to share your thoughts, your opinions on all things Black Christmas. And it doesn't have to be just the original. It can be the remake. It can be the 2006 movie, the Billy films, comments, whatever the case is, right? Theories, anticipation for Billy 2, whatever. But it's a group page, so you guys can post there. So please feel free to join if you have Facebook. That would be really awesome, because obviously we're only about 4 or 5 months away now from the 50th anniversary of that original movie. So, and of course, when It's Me Billy Chapter 2 drop. So very excited about that. Thank you, Josh, for joining. I appreciate that very much. Matthew Farisi sends in $9.99. Thank you, Matthew. Says, the city destruction scene was phenomenal. Oh, it was awesome. I love how the force of Godzilla's blast is so powerful. He blasts it outside the city limits, and the sheer might of its power decimates the city. Awesome. Oh, dude, I was laughing, not in a bad way. When he's on land and he gears up and he just opens his mouth and the entire city is like moments before that, there were people running away. There were people screaming, like, what are we going to do? And I really liked, I forgot to mention this. Again, I forget our lead actress's name, but I really liked how she sacrificed herself to save him. Did you guys catch that? When Godzilla was about to blow the atomic breath, she pushes him into that little alley, into that narrow little alley alcove, and she pushes him. She sacrifices herself to save his life. That was really cool. That was really cool, and I really liked that a lot. That was awesome. But yeah, when it's done, it is so eerily quiet, and he comes out, and it's like, I started laughing, not in a bad way. I just was like, holy fuck. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen, and there's been some powerful atomic breath shit in some Godzilla movies. I don't know if I've ever seen that level of destruction from his breath before. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen that. I mean, I got to go watch, I got to go back and watch the movies, but that was epic. That was like, it is like a nuclear bomb every single time it comes out of his mouth. Like, it's devastating. It was wild, which is why I think to myself, okay, if that's how you're going to have his atomic breath in this movie, I do understand why you can't just have him doing it at will. Because like I said earlier, there are a lot of Godzilla movies where he doesn't need to rejuvenate. He doesn't need to wait, 10 minutes. No, he just breathes it whenever the fuck he wants. And I understand that if you took that route with his breath, you wouldn't have a country. Like, you wouldn't have a world. I mean, it would just be like, he'd just be doing that all the time. You know what I mean? So I do understand that. But yeah, that was awesome, dude. I absolutely agree with you. 100%. Josh McKenna sends another $9.99. Thank you, Josh, and says, this might divide the chat room, but I had pineapple on pizza tonight. Yes, Josh. I love it. That's the way to do it. Pineapple on pizza, baby. Brandon Jackson. Hey, what's going on, Brandon? Great to see you here. Says, hey, Dave, I was able to acquire the 1979 first print VHS of Halloween. No, dude, that's awesome. I plan to attend the movie's 50th year convention to have it signed. And if I see you, I would like for you to sign it as well. Oh, cool, man. No problem. I would be more than happy to do that. I don't know where I'll be in 4 more years, but I would love to attend the 50th if I'm able to. Of course, I'll be nearly 50 myself. Jesus Christ. Getting old sucks, man. You ever walk by the mirror and you're like, oh my God, I'm 45. Yeah, dude, I'd be more than happy to do that. That is awesome, man. I'd love to get my hands on something like that. Very cool, Brandon. And thank you for the super chat. Edward Nito sends in a very generous super chat of $20. Thanks, Edward. Says, yeah, this little girl could be like the Professor Hayashida. That's right, in G85. Yeah, yes, exactly. His parents were victims of Godzilla's first. Oh, that's right, dude. That's right. That's right. His parents were victims of Godzilla's first Oto Island. Oto Island, excuse me. Yes, or Otto Island. He became a scientist that specializes in genetic mutations. Interesting idea. Yes, dude, I didn't even make that. I didn't even make that connection when I was thinking about this. You're absolutely correct. Yes, that's what how adorable was that fucking little girl? How fucking adorable was that little girl. I just wanted to pick her up and squeeze her. That is how adorable that little girl was. Oh my God. She was adorable. But you're right. And so as the film was going along, I was thinking to myself that maybe that's what they're going to do. Like maybe, because like I said, although they took the approach of, you know what, she ended up surviving, he ended up surviving, and so they now can be a couple, be together, and raise this child as their own, which they totally get, which I totally get that. And who's to say that this little girl doesn't go in that direction in life and her parents are still alive in 20 years or whatever? I don't know. That's probably not the direction they're going to go. But I really like that. Yeah, you could have had her die. She sacrificed herself. Because think about that. She sacrificed herself to save him. And then he sacrifices himself to save everybody. Like, I mean, that in and of itself is a terrific message, is a terrific theme, is deep, is powerful. Because had she not sacrificed herself at that moment and pushed him into the alley, then he would have died. And then who would have flown that plane at the end? Right? And then you could, track it all the way to that moment. And then that moment that Godzilla was about to breathe fire, he would have breathed that fire and killed everybody on all the ships. Had he not survived, who would have flown the airplane? Right? I mean, maybe somebody would have. I don't know. But you can look at it from that perspective. Right? And so it's a really powerful thing. It's a very, very powerful thing. To go both ways, right? To go that way and Godzilla win. And it's like, oh my God. And then he just kind of like maybe goes off and he's never seen again, and then 25 years later, we're following this woman who was that girl. Her parents were killed in the Godzilla attacks, whatever the case is, right? I don't know. Well, I guess no, Godzilla wouldn't have won. He still, had he sacrificed himself, they still would have won. Yeah. They still would have won. Godzilla drowns, but you still see that sort of that regenerating just before it cuts to black, right? I think that's really cool. And yeah, you could have gone both ways with this. And I think it would have been really fascinating. But yeah, I forgot about that. That's right. I don't know if they're going to go that route, but you could, and you still could do it. But I think it would have been more powerful had they sacrificed themselves. Well, she actually did sacrifice herself. She just ended up winning. Ended up living. Antonis Andriotis sends in $4.99. Thanks, buddy. Says, hey, Dave, did you see the most recent reviews of The Strangers Chapter 1 are awful? Yes, I did. I have not seen The Strangers Chapter 1. I will probably catch it when it comes to streaming. It just looked like a complete remake of the 2008 movie, for which I actually quite like. So no, I did not see it. Antonis follows up. Thanks, buddy. Says, Dave, what is your favorite Jaws movie? For me, it's Jaws 2. What is the worst Jaws movie for you? Well, my favorite is the original, hands down. I mean, it is the, it's not just, it's not just the best Jaws movie. It's one of the greatest movies in cinematic history. It's like The Exorcist, right? The Exorcist is not just a great horror movie. It's one of the greatest movies of all time. It was one of, if not the first horror movie in history to be nominated for Best Picture. So Jaws is in that category. So Jaws for me, hands down, and it's not even close. I like Jaws 2. I actually quite like Jaws 2 a lot. But if we're comparing it to Jaws 1, it's just, it's apples and oranges. And then the worst Jaws movie for me would be Jaws The Revenge, probably, although Jaws 3 is right there. Jaws 3 is right there. And if you ask me on a different day, maybe it's Jaws 3. I'm not sure. I saw Jaws The Revenge at the drive-in when it came out in 1987. I saw Jaws The Revenge at the drive-in. Of course, I was, 8 years old, so I can't quite remember. I don't think I liked it, though. I don't think it was me, my sister, and my mother. And I don't think any of us liked it. But I remember that. I also saw Gremlins and the first Back to the Future at the drive-in back in the 80s. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Not re-releases like their actual first releases. which is pretty cool. All right, have I got all the super chats? I think I did. Yes, I believe I have. Davey Deathray says, the perk of hiring a VFX supervisor as director is you can bring in their FX house on the cheap. That must be how they squeeze so much out of the budget. The production value of the film is insane. Yeah, that's a good point. And that may have something to do with it. Yeah, like I said, I mean, it is remarkable what they were able to achieve on such a limited budget. It is remarkable. It does, you know, I mean, are there certain moments where you're like, oh, but not really. Like, it is pretty comparable to any modern Hollywood major monster Godzilla movie. Like, it's pretty comparable. Like, there was not once in that movie where I went, yeah, nope. Everything looked totally pro, totally legit, 100%. Everything, like, it looked Hollywood to me, you know, and so again, maybe there were certain effects, maybe certain movements, maybe Godzilla did once or twice that maybe looked like and they needed to smooth out the render a bit or something. Maybe, I don't know, but I mean, not really. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm looking for something to nitpick at this point, you know, on a $15 million budget, and that's what you deliver? Holy fuck. Right? Like, it's wild. It's so amazing. Horror and Coffee says, Dave, you saw the marking on Noriko's neck at the end. I did, yes. Okay, so her name is Norikos. I did see that. What was that? Yes, thanks for bringing that up, Horror and Coffee. What was that? I did see that, but I'm not sure what it was. I might have to watch again, but the chat room can but I did see that, yes. And I was like, oh, what's that? What's going on here? She like, what's happening? Very cool. Very, 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 very cool. Michael King says, I don't know much about Godzilla, just learned about his origin from Dave tonight. Why wouldn't Godzilla want to destroy the US after what they did in 45? Well, I think we have to remember that Godzilla, you know, he doesn't, it's not personal, right? Like, Godzilla isn't destroying Tokyo because he hates the Japanese. Godzilla's not thinking like that, right? Godzilla's a predator, right? He's an animal. It's like a cat, or, you know, the lion isn't out in the wild. Like it's not personal, right? And so why does Godzilla attack Tokyo? Well, it's a Japanese movie. Why did Godzilla in Godzilla 2014 attack San Francisco? Well, you know, or why did he come? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, it's a Japanese film, and you can look at it as an allegory. You can look at it metaphorically. You know, Godzilla is the atomic bomb that's coming in. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of, like, it would take a really long time for me to dive into the layers of the history of Godzilla here. That's a whole other show. But do a little reading on the backstory of the 1954 Godzilla movie, his first film. And sort of the themes of that movie and what the movie's really all about. Godzilla he is the creation in some ways from those atomic bombs, right? That this is what can happen. You can create, like, he's a metaphor, really, is what Godzilla is. That's why Godzilla's nuclear, right? That's why he's nuclear, right? And so, because he is the nuclear bomb, if you know what I mean, right? And so there's a lot going on. I get it would take a long time for me to dive into the layers, but it's not personal. It's not like he knows who the United States are. Godzilla doesn't know that the U.S. dropped bomb. Like, he's not intelligent like that, right? He's an animal. For all intents and purposes, yeah, he's a cat in the wild. The cat has no idea right now that Russia attacked Ukraine. Like a lion in the Serengeti right now has no idea what the fuck is going on in Ukraine. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not, so it's not personal. It's instinctual. There's a lot of it. Now you can write a Godzilla story that makes it instinctual, and Lord knows, out of all the Godzilla movies over the years, they have done their best to weave little things like that into stories and narratives, and Godzilla's teaming up with other monsters, and he knows he's protecting Earth, and and he knows that he needs to protect Earth but even in the MonsterVerse movies, they've done a really good job at like Godzilla isn't protecting the people, and that's another thing that I really like about what they did with Godzilla King of the Monsters is like Godzilla, and I believe they even said this in that movie, or at least alluded to it. These monsters now I'm talking about the MonsterVerse now, the Hollywood films. These monsters can exist without us. Like Earth doesn't need humans. Like they really don't. Like Mother Earth doesn't need us. It doesn't. And neither do these monsters. So when Godzilla comes to the surface, he's not coming to the surface to save the humans, right? In some sort of, way you can look at it that way. But he's coming to the surface and teaming up against these other monsters to save Earth because they live on it. Like has nothing. That's why so many humans are collateral damage. Right? That's why Godzilla is tossing things into buildings and breathing fire. He totally wrecked fucking, what was it? Hong Kong and Godzilla v. Kong or whatever it was. That fucking city was destroyed. How many people died? Millions, maybe. He doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't care. He's got to do what he's got to do, man. It's about balance, right? The balance, the equilibrium of the earth and the land and the, nature and we're caught in the middle of all that, right? And so, I like that kind of thing. It's not like, Godzilla is self-aware that he's Godzilla and that he, knows that evil country dropped that the Americans are evil. I'm just saying, like, painting it that way in his own mind, right? This evil country killed all these people. I'm going to go kill the Americans because it has nothing to do with that. No, it's just, it really was it was a metaphor for what happened with the U.S. and the Japanese during the Second World War. And of course, it now became a tradition for Godzilla to attack Tokyo. But is he attacking Tokyo? Maybe. You know what I mean? It's not personal, like, hey, that guy owes me money. It's always metaphorical and symbolic and layered. What does this mean? What are more the deeper themes of Godzilla -1 here, right? You can dive into that. It's not just a monster movie. That's why when you watch the 1956 American version of that 1954 movie, a lot of those themes are dumbed down because the Americans, are like, oh, we don't want to be seen as the bad guys. It's like, well, no one's saying you're the bad guys, but you did drop 2 nuclear. You're the only country in the world to ever use nuclear weapons on just that. But anyway, that's a whole other political topic, of course, right? Again, like I said at the top of the show, some people feel it was necessary. There are others that don't. But that is the inception of Godzilla. That's what Godzilla, that's the inception of him. That's why he was created. And that's why he's nuclear. And so, yeah, if you're a fan or if you have a little bit of insight or kind of interest in Godzilla, do a bit of research on the backstory of where this character comes from and why this character exists, because that can get lost in the, how many Godzilla movies are there now? Like 80? I don't know, between Toho and the US. There's so many films now, and that can get lost over the years, because eventually over the years, Godzilla did just become a monster, at that point. But I really like sort of the deeper stuff and how things are, because the inception of Godzilla was really a metaphor. So you could almost look at Godzilla attacking Tokyo in the 1954 film as the U.S. attacking Japan. You know what I'm saying? Like it kind of has that vibe to it. and that layer to it. And this is what can happen. You know, it can, yes, maybe the war ended, but you can create a monster out of, you know, and it's so interesting. It's so fascinating. And obviously today, Japan and the US are, you know, Japan is our ally, and, you know, that's history. It's hard to believe that's not even 100 years ago. Crazy. But, you know, obviously things have changed and we're better off for it. But yeah, there are a certain generation of fans that just think Godzilla is just this fun lizard monster that breathes fire. And it's like, yes, but there's more to him than that. And when you make a movie like Godzilla -1 that gives heart and character development and layers and themes and symbolism, and it's really cool. Like, it's really cool. Not that Godzilla and King Kong standing on an aircraft carrier can't, you know, those kinds of movies can't be fun too. They can, but I much prefer these kinds of movies. And the thing is too, I was saying this to Frank and Darren today, of the Slaughtered Lamb. I said, I don't know where you go with this though. Like, the thing I will say, these kinds of Godzilla movies probably have a shelf life. Like, you can make the dumb Godzilla, and I say dumb, not in a, you know, I know it's in, but you know, the more cheesy, lighter popcorn fart movies like Godzilla X Kong, you can make those. That doesn't mean they're always going to do, you know, well, but you can make those kinds of movies forever, like teaming up with different monsters and different scenarios and different stakes. And, you know, you can make those forever. But the more serious Godzilla movies where it's just Godzilla, I don't think you can. I mean, how many of those can you make before you've kind of done it? You've done the story, and now you yourself are introducing something weird, like a threat. And now all of a sudden Godzilla's your friend. You know, and that's really what ended up happening, is that's where because there's lots of movies where Godzilla's the good guy, right? And so if they're going to do a sequel to Godzilla -1, and maybe I'll do another show where I dive more in depth on what I'd love to see. But if they do a sequel and I see them doing it, I wonder what they're going to do and how much, like, how far can you go with this? Maybe they make it a trilogy, like a one and done sort of kind of nice trilogy. That might be fun. You know, kind of like what, you know, Nolan did with The Dark Knight and things like that. And, you know, Lord of the Rings, and, you know, you do like a nice trilogy that, you know, and if it's great stories and great characters and there's a through line, like, maybe it would be really awesome, you know, really epic. I just don't see them going on with this kind of tone, because I don't think it lends itself to multiple movies. You know what I mean? So I'll be very curious to see where they go with it, but it definitely is. It's definitely fascinating, definitely interesting. All right, let me just see. I just want to make sure I've missed any super chats. I don't believe I have. No, Antonis Andriotis was the last one. Okay. Just want to make sure I'm not missing any. Make sure I'm not missing any. Aaron Click says, I feel it looks way better than most of these types of movies that Hollywood delivers. They never went cartoony with the CGI. The simplicity lent itself to the grounded nature. Could not agree more. Could not agree more. Absolutely agree. CM, Chris, my man, says it was part of Godzilla embedded in her after the blast. It was, it's what helped her survive. Regeneration abilities. Okay. Ooh, fascinating. Oh, dude, if that's what they're setting up, that's something fascinating for humankind. That's something interesting. Okay. This is interesting. I feel like I want to dive deep into it right now, but you know, this might be better for another show. Yeah, this might be better for another show, but let me just say that if that's what it is, I'm not saying it isn't, obviously. I didn't catch on to that specifically what it was. Okay, cool. That makes sense. Then she becomes very important to science. She becomes extreme, if people catch on to why, right? That is interesting. That's an interesting template, either part of the entire story or a strong subplot, because they're going to want to study her. What is that going to mean for humankind? How valuable does she suddenly become? Right? And does that then mean, does she have a connection to Godzilla? That, you see, they know they can't just go on and on and on, right? With this kind of Godzilla movie, because you're going to want to introduce all kinds of monsters. Introducing something like this is interesting. I don't know if there's ever been a Godzilla movie where they've done that. Maybe there has, I don't know. But that's interesting to me, because then that, maybe she's got a special connection to Godzilla. Maybe, and I don't mean like a cheesy connection. I just mean that maybe there's something there. They're going to want to study her. They're going to want to, and she's going to probably be not for that. It's going to be an area of contention between him, her, their child, and the government and science. And they're going to want to know, you know, maybe this is something that could be great for all humanity. People who are in car accidents, people who have, you know, trauma from war, they can save people's lives this way. They can maybe inject people with some sort of thing and regenerate tissue and organs and save people's lives. And I mean, that's a whole thing right there. That's a whole thing right there, which would be very interesting for a continuation. And what does that mean for Godzilla? I mean, obviously we saw Godzilla at the end. He was, you know, regenerating as well. What does that mean? You know, does Godzilla become that's fascinating. There's so many ways you can go with that. So many ways you could go with that. That's really cool, man. That's really cool. That's really cool. I'm excited. And it takes me a lot to get excited for some movies, but that's interesting. That's interesting. Very, very cool. Steve Evans sends in $4.99. Thank you, Steve. And says, Dave, do yourself a favor and go see In a Violent Nature. I probably won't go see it in the theater. I'll probably wait till it comes to streaming. It depends if I have the time or not. I've heard mixed reviews on it. I know a lot about it, obviously. I know how it works. And I'm very curious to see how I'm going to feel. You know, of course, I will be honest with you. I always am. If I don't like it, I will tell you I don't like it, and I'll tell you why I don't like it or why it didn't work for me. And if I really like it, I'll tell you why. But definitely, I don't know if many of you know this, but In a Violent Nature is a Canadian horror film shot by Canadian indie filmmakers right here in Ontario. So that's very cool. Canadian horror indie brethren out there shooting Canadian horror movies. There's lots of Canadian horror movies, right? You got My Bloody Valentine, you got Scanners, you got Black Christmas, you got, I think Terror Train was even Canadian. You've got In a Violent Nature now. You've got The Brooding, Curtains. Lots of good Canadian horror movies, for those of you that may not know. And although I'm not a big fan of Terror Train, I'll be totally honest with you. Not a big fan of that one. But yes, In a Violent Nature is Canadian, so I have to share that. And it's shot here in Ontario. So, of course, it doesn't take place in Ontario and doesn't take place in Canada. That's always better for distribution. It's so sad. I find that extremely frustrating. I could understand why 50 years ago, but it is extremely frustrating even today that Canadian movies, not all the time, but if you want to up your chances of being picked up by U.S. distributors, there is still this stigma that it is better to shoot it here and to set your movie in the U.S. That's why they do that all here. Hollywood comes up here all the time for, tax breaks. And, of course, our dollar is only like 69 cents to your dollar. And so money goes further up here. And, there's all different kinds of reasons why they come up here. But I always find I'm like, no, fuck that, man. Like, it should just say it's up here and just, but, it is what it is. Now, obviously in Billy, we've set our film in the U.S. simply because of continuity, because the original Black Christmas, although it's a Canadian movie shot here in Toronto and very Canadian with a large Canadian cast, it takes place in the U.S. But yeah, Canadian film in a Violent Nature, a Canadian indie movie shot here in Ontario, Northern Ontario. I know where they shot it. And so, yeah, go out and support for sure. And I've heard good things, and I've heard, you know what I mean? So, but give credit where credit is due in the sense of they've tried something different. They've done something different. And I think that's really cool. I think that's really, really cool. I don't know if I'm going to like it. I don't know if I'm going to jam with it. But I like what they're doing. Now, does it have sequel potential? I don't know. We'll see. Let me see here. Steve Adams says, Dave, in a Violent Nature really say that it's set in the U.S.? I don't know if they say that in the movie. I'm not entirely sure. But I thought there was maybe I'm wrong, but I thought there was a plot synopsis or something. I thought there was something where they were like, in the northern Midwest of the U.S. or like something like that. There was some sort of mention of in the wilderness in the U.S. or something. I thought there was some sort of mention of that. Maybe I'm wrong. Now I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know if they allude to that in the film. Maybe they don't. But I thought there was something like that, but I could be wrong. But yeah, it's a Canadian film. I don't know the indie filmmakers. I'd have to look up. I'd have to look them up and see if I know any of the crew. See if any of the crew that I know worked on it. I'm not sure. It's possible, but I think it's awesome. What they've worked their asses off. You know what I mean? It may not be for everybody, but they worked their asses off. They got a distributor, or they played at a festival. They got a distributor, and now it's in theaters. And it's got like 80% on Rotten Tomatoes or whatever it is. I mean, and it's going to make probably a little bit of money this weekend. So, good for them. Aaron Click says, does the movie exactly hint at that? Not saying it's not true, but I didn't notice anything. Might just be me. Yeah, I didn't notice that either. Oh, do you mean the In a Violent Nature, or do you mean Godzilla? The regenerating, or In a Violent Nature? Which one are you saying? Aaron will let me know. I think he's talking about the regenerating. I think that's what he's talking about. If I'm correct. I think you're right, Aaron. Because I didn't notice that either. I didn't notice anything specifically that made me think. It kind of looked like maybe she had some sort of. At first, I thought it was a tattoo, but then it looked like maybe there was something in her. Godzilla. Okay, yeah. It kind of reminded me of like Stranger Things or something. You know what I mean? Like, oh, is she? Because here's something too. Maybe she's infected with something. Like if it doesn't mean she has regenerating capabilities, then maybe she's infected with something that will make her die. Like, who knows? I have no idea, right? I'm not sure. But if it is the regenerating thing, I think that's fucking cool, man. I think that's fucking cool. And I kind of hope that's what it is. But we'll see. Michael King says, Halloween Resurrection is Canadian. No, Halloween Resurrection is not Canadian. It was shot in Vancouver, but it's not a Canadian movie. So for something to be a Canadian movie or a US movie or a British movie, the vast majority of its funding, this is sort of the Cliff Notes version, the vast majority of its funding must come from that particular country. So you can shoot, like Hollywood shoots up here all the time, right? The Chucky TV show is shot in Toronto. Star Trek Discovery is shot in Toronto. It Chapter 1 and 2 is shot in Toronto. Thanksgiving was shot up here. They shoot up here all the time, right? Vancouver, Toronto. But those are American movies. And that's because the studios that are distributing them, the production companies that are, making them, where the money is coming from is coming from the US, right? And so they are US productions. They're US movies. The funding for Black Christmas, the funding for Curtains, the funding for In a Violent Nature, whatever the case is, can be, well, it depends. It depends on where, because I think In a Violent Nature was crowdfunded. So I'm not sure where that came from. I'm not entirely sure. But generally speaking, that's kind of, and then when some of the money, when there's like 60% US and like 40%, Canadian, or 60% US and 40%, from the UK or whatever, then it can be like a US-UK co-production, right? You see that sometimes too. Or an American-Canadian co-production. Like It's Me, Billy, Chapter 1 and 2, you could look at that as a US-Canadian co-production, right? Because a lot of the money that we raised came from the US. Most of the money we raised came from the US. But there's also a lot of money that is coming from Canada, right? But it's always the two sort of, like they're not going to go down the chain of, oh, it's a US, Canadian, Venezuela, Honduras, Guatemala. Like they're not going to do that just because $7 came from, a certain country. It's where sort of the bulk of the two bulk countries, we'll say, generally speaking, that's kind of where you see it. And sometimes it's totally from one country or another, and sometimes it's a co-production. So, from a certain point of view, you could look at It's Me, Billy, Chapter 1 and 2 and be like, oh, that's like it's a Canadian US production. You could look at it that way from a certain point of view, but there is a heavy Canadian influence because obviously our production company is Canadian. It's shot here. It's an all Canadian cast, using the Canadian Union, ACTRA, Canadian contracts, Canadian crew. So it is very much a Canadian film. But from a certain point of view, you could look at it as a Canadian-American production because a lot of the money that we raised did come from the US, from all you guys, right? So, but yeah, just because it is shot in a certain country doesn't mean that it is a movie from that country. It's a Canadian movie or a US movie or a French movie or whatever the case is, right? There's more to it than that. So no, Halloween Resurrection is very much a US movie. Unless some of the funding did come from Canada. Let's see here. Halloween Resurrection. Let me just go to the Wikipedia page because sometimes it says that. No, it says Halloween Resurrection is a 2002 American slasher film. American slasher film, period. Yeah. No, it's a US film. But a lot of that was shot here in Vancouver, on a soundstage in Vancouver. Okay, did I miss any super chats? Steve Evans got that one. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Chester Franklin Jr. says, Dave, did you hear that Mike Flanagan was confirmed to direct the new Exorcist movie? I have. Fascinating stuff. I might do a show on it. Steve Evans says Suits was shot in Toronto, but set in New York. Yep. Oh, yeah. Guys, a lot of stuff is shot here. You can shoot in Toronto, and depending on where you are, right, you can pretend it's New York. Toronto's a big city, fourth largest in North America. Skyscrapers, subways, streetcars, bums on the street. Not everywhere, but it's a big city. You got your bum from time to time. It's a big city. So you can shoot in downtown Toronto. Suicide Squad was shot here. And depending on Reacher is shot here. Depending on where you are and how you frame. Obviously you can't show the CN Tower in the shot because that's very Toronto. But yeah, they shoot all the time here. And one of the big reasons they shoot here is because it's cheaper, right? Our dollar is not worth as much. So the US dollar goes further here. Tax breaks, right? Toronto has, to get business to come to the city, there's terrific tax breaks. And so, yeah, there's lots of stuff that's shot here. My goodness. Well, Guillermo del Toro right now is shooting Frankenstein here. And there is a gigantic ship on Lake Ontario. When I say Lake Ontario, I mean one of the Great Lakes. If you live close to the Great Lakes, you know that it looks like an ocean. Like literally. Like you can stand in front of one of the Great Lakes and you don't see it looks like the ocean. Now, if you live by the ocean, obviously there's a bit of a difference, but it looks like the ocean. And he's shooting that in Toronto. Sean Sullivan, Lynn Griffin's husband, has a role in that movie. And he emailed me. We exchanged an email a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking to me about how he was talking on set, or he was talking to Guillermo del Toro on set, and they were hamming it up and talking about film and stuff. I was like, oh, that's so fucking awesome. That's amazing. And and so there is a gigantic ship that was built for Frankenstein, and it is in the Toronto harbor right now. At least it was a few weeks ago, and they're shooting Frankenstein right now in Toronto, and they're probably shooting at Pinewood. Toronto has Pinewood as well, which is one of the biggest, it's a huge film studio where they shoot. And so, yeah, no, they shoot all the time up here. I'm always, I always run into people who are working on stuff and, whatever the case is. And so it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I would love to have been on the Frankenstein set. Well, they're probably still shooting. So, yeah. And Vancouver, of course, they shoot all kinds of shit up there. So, yeah. Antonis Andriotis says, Dave, how many hours flight is it to Canada if I live in California? Well, whereabouts in Canada do you want to go? That's like me saying, how long of a flight to the US is it from Canada? Well, where are you going? Right? Am I going to Buffalo or am I going to Los Angeles? If I'm going to Buffalo, I could fly there in like 30 minutes from Toronto. If I'm going to Los Angeles, it'll take me 5 hours. Right? So whereabouts in Canada do you want to fly to? Do you want to go to Vancouver? Do you want to go to Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Montreal, Toronto? Whereabouts are you looking to fly? Steve Evans says, Halloween 4. Why is it that the movie, The Mask, sucks, but on the official poster, it looks like the 1978 one? Just probably because that poster was created for, there are a lot of things. Look, I mean, I don't know. The short answer is I don't know. But it was probably created from not to deceive anybody, it's not to manipulate anybody. It was created before the film was cut together. Maybe somebody who created the poster didn't really have a good idea of what the mask looked like in the movie. Again, this is the 80s, folks. And unless the poster artist was looking at dailies, it's not like the internet. There's photos plastered all over it's the 80s. And so the poster artist probably looked at the Michael Myers mask from the first two movies, that's all he had to go on, and that's what he did. And it was a great poster. And then, of course, but it doesn't look like the mask in the movie. So, yeah, I don't think there was any ill intent. That's why you will sometimes see shots in trailers that don't wind up in the movie. It is not, it is not because the studio is trying to deceive you and manipulate you. Maybe there's cases of that, but generally speaking, movie trailers are always cut long before the movie is even finished its assembly edit. Or not necessarily its assembly edit, but certainly finished picture lock. Assembly edit is sort of the first thing you put together, and then you go in and you tweak and you cut and you figure it all out. Your picture lock is when you lock picture and you're done. You're done editing, your locked picture, stop it, don't tweak anymore, it's good. Movie trailers are usually always cut and finished before picture lock. And so, that is why they will have footage of a movie, and it could be a filmmaker's intent to have that scene in the movie, but then as they continue to assemble and continue to, massage and noodle and work away at it, and I think we can shade it and all that kind of stuff. They continue the editing process. They realize, I think maybe we should take that scene out, or not that scene necessarily, but that shot out. And that is why sometimes you'll be like, oh, that shot that's in the trailer is not in the movie. It's not because they're like, it's just a natural product of the editing process. That sometimes it's taken out because they realize it's better without it. You know what I mean? For pacing or for whatever the case is, right? That can happen. So I'm not saying that there isn't, I'm not saying that there isn't cheeky things happening in editing, that doesn't happen. But to say that, to paint it with a broad brush and say that every time a scene or a shot doesn't end up in a film that was in the trailer, it's because they're trying to manipulate you and because they think you're fucking dumb. No, it's just probably the byproduct of a trailer being cut, a year before the movie's even done being edited. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what tends to happen, So, yeah. Michael King says, in Scream 6, didn't they use Canada for the setting of New York? Yeah, they used Montreal. That's right. They used Montreal. So, Canada's a big place, guys. So you got to be specific where but yes, it was shot in Montreal. And it stood in for New York. That's it. Antonis, have you answered Antonis? I'm not looking to fly. I was just wondering how far a distance it was. Oh, well, I mean, from California, you said. Well, I mean, I guess you would just drive north. So you'd go north to San Francisco and then keep going into Washington and, Seattle, and then you would hit the Canadian border. So I don't know. How long is that? What is that? Maybe I'm not sure. I don't really know. But Canada's a big place, guys. I mean, Canada's the second largest country in the world landmass. We do have many cities and many towns. And so if you want to know how far Canada is, you got to be specific. Well, whereabouts, right? Whereabouts in Canada, but if you just mean in general, well, you would just, the easiest route would be to drive north to Seattle and then cross the border into Vancouver. How far that is, I don't know. How far a plane ride? Maybe 3 hours? I'm not sure. For me to fly from Toronto to Los Angeles is about 5 hours. 4.5, 5 hours. But if you want to fly from like Nova Scotia, Halifax, right, the most eastern part of Canada, to fly to LA, it's probably at least a 7-hour flight, I would imagine. At least, maybe 6 hours, maybe, I would imagine. But yeah, it depends on where you are, where you want to go. Antonis says, how far is your city from Los Angeles, California by flight? About 4.5, 5 hours. 4.5, 5 hours. Yeah. Yep. Okay, let me see here. All right, we're at an hour and a half. The Godzilla chat has quieted a little bit, which is good. Michael King says, all right, again, didn't know that. They had to hire Canadian actors. That's why Brad Lurie got the role of the Shape. But again, I'm not sure on the specifics of the production. Is Brad Lurie Canadian? I don't think Brad Lurie is Canadian, is he? I don't think so. Let me just see here. Halloween Resurrection. Maybe he is Canadian. I don't know. I don't think he is. Brad Lurie is... Oh, he is. He's a Canadian actor and stuntman. Well, I'll tell you, that's not the reason why they had to. Keep in mind that when a movie shoots in Canada, they don't have to hire Canadian actors, right? They can hire whoever they want. Actors travel all the time, right? I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger was up here about 2 weeks ago shooting a movie, right? So they don't have to. Now, what they will likely do, okay, the stars of a movie are likely, if a U.S. production is coming to Canada to shoot, if the leads of the movie who were hired, if a couple of the leads happen to be Canadian, okay, well, that's fine. But they don't have to be Canadian. So many Americans, will fly up here to shoot all the time. I mean, look at all the stuff that I've talked about, Reacher and Star Trek Discovery and Chucky and all that kind of stuff, right? What will tend to happen, though, is your sort of day players, right? What they're called day players. So like, your extras that come in or, background performers, things like that. They will be the citizenship of the country where you were shooting, because it is always easier to fill those roles when you're there, right? So they will, the casting director will reach out to agencies in those cities or background agencies in those cities, and they will fill out the cast, right? The day players, a minor supporting role, things like that. They will fill those out, generally speaking, in the cities where they're shooting, because it's just easier to do that, right? That's why you will often see, like when I don't know if you did see this, but when the Halloween films were casting for, certain roles, they were looking for actors in and around, South Carolina or North, wherever where the hell did they shoot? Wilmington, I think it was, right? So they would look for some extras from Wilmington. There's no point in bringing extras in from LA, right? And the same thing goes to wherever they shoot, whether that's in the UK, whether that's here in Canada, wherever in Canada, to fill out the cast, your day players, your minor supporting roles. Remember, a supporting role can be a big role, right? You can have a lot of lines, and so, please know that wasn't necessarily why Brad Lurie was hired. He just might so happen to be Canadian. But it is not unprecedented for productions to do that, but to look for certain, kind of to fill out the cast, because it's just easier. Because that way they don't have to fly, 150 people in, right? They just have to fly the main cast in, which could be like 5 people. If a movie is shot in Canada, it doesn't have to be a Canadian cast at all. Like, I mean, your stars, not at all. Not at all. It can be if you want them to be, but it doesn't have to be. The reason why productions will shoot in Canada a lot is because of tax breaks. It's about money. And we have the resources here. Toronto and Vancouver, but Toronto a lot, is the 3rd largest film and TV production center in North America. So you have Los Angeles is number 1, New York is number 2, and in a lot of cases, Toronto is number 3. Sometimes depending on the year and depending on how many productions are shooting, Vancouver might come up a little bit, and overtake Toronto, but then Toronto might, is there the next year, you know what I mean? It's huge. That's why they call it Hollywood North, right? It's a huge mecca and production center. That's why I'm here. I'm Canadian. And when I left college to enter into the entertainment industry, when you're in LA, it's like, well, when you're in the States and you want to pursue a career in the entertainment business, the question is New York or LA? Well, in Canada, it's Toronto or Vancouver, right? Well, I was already in the Toronto area, so I stayed here. And it's a mecca here, man. It is. But they come up here because we have the resources, we have the crew, we have great actors, we have great agencies, great studios, and we're cheaper because our dollar is only 69 cents to the US dollar, right? Well, it varies between 69 and like 75, and it depends. It's always changing each day. But that's why when I put on the Indiegogo campaign, if you're Canadian and you're buying a Blu-ray from my campaign, it might cost you like, I don't know, $30. But in the US, that might only be $22. You know what I mean? So the US dollar goes further up here, which is another reason why they shoot up here a lot. So tax breaks and the money goes farther. And obviously we're pretty fucking hip, man. We're pretty fucking hip. All right, we'll go another 10 minutes. We'll take this thing to 9 o'clock, go another 10 minutes, and then we will call it a day. Brandon Collins says, Dave, have you ever heard the Mystery Science Theater 3000 Canada song? It's the greatest thing ever. I have not. No, I'll have to look that up, my man. Brandon says 5 hours by plane, 45 hours by car, 917 hours by foot. Brandon looked this up. So so it's 5 hours from LA to Vancouver? Fascinating. So LA to Vancouver is the same distance from LA to Toronto? That's interesting. I guess we're just going in really interesting. There you go. 45 hours by car, 917 hours by foot. That's not bad. Actually, that's not bad. That's not bad. It's not bad. I thought it would have been, I'm your friend. I'm just your tour-friendly neighborhood Googleman. Hey, listen, man, it's a way to go. It's a way to go. Let me see here. Just scrolling back here. Michael King says, who doesn't love Captain Quint? Captain Quint? There was kind of a Quint character in Godzilla -1, wasn't there? Like a little bit. Kind of. Scared Straight Production says, Dave, you ever do a 70s, 80s Grindhouse trailer for It's Me, Billy for part 2? Harry Hagen made a trailer for the first one and it's great. No, probably not. But if Harry wanted to do one for part 2, he's more than welcome to. I really like that one he did for It's Me, Billy. I thought that was really cool. Harry's awesome. Yeah, he's a great supporter, great contributor. And I thought that was really cool that he did that. You know what I mean? I thought that was pretty cool. But probably not. You never know. Like, I mean, we're in the middle of obviously beginning the marketing now, in terms of like starting to think about it, assemble things. I am pleased to say that the film is about, now obviously there will be tweaks and massages and noodles between now and the time that it's released. But we're probably about 80% through the edit now, and that includes sound design, and it's looking good. It's looking good. And all I will say is, and all I will continue to say is that it does act, and it's supposed to, because it was designed this way. It does act like the last half of this movie. So it's not something that you can just watch on. I mean, of course it's something you can watch on your own, but if you've never seen It's Me, Billy Chapter 1, first of all, what are you waiting for? It's up on Vimeo and YouTube for free. But if you haven't seen it, then, well, maybe you're waiting for Chapter 2. But I highly recommend watching Chapter 1 and then watching Chapter 2. Or do one even better. Watch Black Christmas, then Chapter 1, then Chapter 2, and then you'll get the whole kind of vibe. But there's no sense in just watching Chapter 2. Like, things won't make any sense. Now that doesn't mean that you won't like Chapter 2 better than Chapter 1. Maybe you will, I don't know. But it is clear this is the last half of the movie. Like, it's not like, for example, we would never, like, you could release, which we did, Chapter 1 played in a few festivals. You could release Billy Chapter 1 on its own, which, well, obviously we did, but like, you could submit that to festivals and it could run as its own thing, even though there's a cliffhanger and it feels a little unfinished because it was designed that way. It's like, oh yeah, like this could kind of play as a kind of like a piece. Chapter 2 can't do that. Like, it would make no fucking sense. You know what I mean? Like, it picks up immediately where the first one left off. And so it's very important, and I say this, that Chapter 2 and Chapter 1, they go hand in hand. So we are planning at some point butting the two films together and releasing that to festivals, because we can't just put, part 2 in it just doesn't make any sense. And then at some point, maybe later this year, maybe for Christmas time, I don't know. I make no promises. It all depends on where we are with the whole thing and perks and all that. We would like to release we would like to release the movie, the Christmas cut, up online as a feature, so you can watch it as a feature, kind of like what Vincent DeSantis done, right? He's got Never Hike Alone up online. He's got Never Hike in the Snow up online. He's got Never Hike Alone 2 online. But I believe he's also preparing to release like the epic the epic Never Hike Alone cut, which would be like, I don't know, 2.5 hours long and whatever it is, and release that as like one big feature where you can just sit and watch that. We're planning on doing something like that too with Billy, where it's, we'll call it like the Christmas cut or the Billy cut or something. And it's just the two movies butted together. But what we have to do first, though, is we have to make sure like Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 work very well together episodically in terms of, it's not really episodic, but in terms of episodes, right? So you have 1, you have Episode 2, that works really well. But you can't necessarily just butt the two films together and play them. Like, you got to butt them together and then watch it and see if it makes sense. Does this feel like, do we need to kind of make a little adjustment here in terms of like pacing, or does this feel like we need to make an adjustment so the acts are more clearly, because again, it's a special kind of cut, right? It's the Christmas cut. And so some scenes might be rearranged a little bit, right? It's that's interesting. You know what I mean? Who knows, right? So we have to butt the two films together and see if it plays well. And who knows, maybe it'll play fine as is. Or it might be like, yeah, this is good, but it feels like it's 2 parts. So if we want this to feel like it's one movie, we need to make some adjustments here and things like that. So I make no promises at it being up by Christmas this year, but hey, doesn't matter. Chapter 2 will be up on October 11th, which is very exciting. So yeah, it's looking good. It's looking good. There's a few moments where we watch it back and the sound design and the look. Now it hasn't gone to color yet. It's not color graded, not color time, not color corrected. That will be happening this summer. We'll obviously hand the project file over to the color department. But even still, like, I mean, it looks great. And there's moments where I'm like, this looks really good. But again, You can't please everybody, right? Some people are going to like it. Some people are not going to like it. Like chapter 1. Some people like what we did. Some people didn't like what we did. You know what I mean? But you can't please everybody. That's art. That's film. That's movies. But we've worked our asses off. We worked our butts off to try and deliver something to pay honor and respect to the original Black Christmas. And that's what this is really all about at the end of the day. You know what I mean? And hopefully you'll like what we've done. Hopefully you'll like what we've done. I think you will. Like it's pretty cool. And it's pretty cool to see Lynn. We've cut her scenes together. Well, we still have some scenes of hers to cut, but we've cut an important scene of hers together. And she's just great. Like there's this one scene I'll say, can I say this? Well, no, I'll just say that there's this one scene where it's just like, because you have two seasoned actors in the scene together, Lynn and Glenn Michael Grant. Who's playing Detective Mike Henney. And like, it was just a pleasure to cut this scene together because you can tell that these are, seasoned actors. You know what I mean? I just feel like it was just a pleasure, like there's no moment where you're like, oh God, there's the fan film acting. Do you know what I mean? Like there's nothing that it's just like, oh yeah, these are, they've done this before, you know what I mean? And so it was just a pleasure to cut that together. Victoria is she's fire. She was great in the first film. And, who else? And obviously Lisa Kovac, who plays Jess, she was terrific and she had big shoes to fill. She stepped in. That's not easy for any actor, to get a call and say, hey, how are you? So we kind of have an issue here. But she was on board. She was so thankful and she did a great job. And we couldn't have asked for a better person. We were just so thankful that she was available. Do you know what I mean? Cause there was no guarantees. If she wasn't available, we would have had to then, obviously look for somebody else, but, which obviously we would have done and we would have found somebody, but we were so thankful she was available because this was 2 weeks before we were going to camera. 2 weeks. That's not a lot of time. That's like, oh, okay. Cause we had a Zoom call with her and she was like, oh, okay. I guess I need to get my head, and she's got to learn the lines. She's got to get her head around what it was. You know what I mean? And she already knew that Olivia Hussey had been cast. She already knew because she was like, I think we were in Production Weekly. We were in, obviously, Bloody Disgusting and Collider and Script. Like she had already known this. And she was like, oh, I think that, and she was very supportive of it. That's amazing. So when she got our email, she was like, oh my God, like that. Oh, that's awful. And she was very like, she understood, you know what I mean? But she's a pro. She's a professional, she's been doing this for years, so, it was just so, yeah, it was just, it was like I said, not to go off on a big tangent. It was a more difficult shoot logistically because of everything involved, a lot more stressful, a lot more things going on, a lot more wheels turning. But hey, that's part of making movies. It's part of making movies. And if you want to, I kept telling myself, hey, if you want to play with the big boys and you want to make movies, these are the decisions and the things you're going to be met with and things you got to deal with as a producer and as a director, or as this and that. And you got to figure things out and you got to, it was nothing bad. It was just like, because of the size of the, production, full scale union shoot, the logistics involved. And even then it's a small, low budget shoot in comparison. But compared to the first Billy, which was a non-union shoot, totally professional, but still, non-union shoot, there were far more wheels and far more things that were going on in chapter 2. And so it was a whole different experience, but a good one. And I'm glad that we went through it. And I think I'm a better filmmaker today because of it, the things I've learned and all that kind of stuff. So, just got to keep going. You know what I mean? And I will say this though, as much as I love It's Me, Billy, and I really do, I am excited. It's a 5-year journey. It's a 5-year journey, right? I made there's a video on my channel. If you type in Dave Mcrae, Black Christmas announcement or something, I made an announcement. It's a video I uploaded in July of 2019. And it was before Blumhouse even made the announcement of the of their film. And I made the announcement. It will have been nearly a 5.5 year journey. But that is like that. You know, the producers and the directors, if you're making multiple films in a series, will stay with a movie the longest, you know, in comparison to, you know, the actors and you know, the crew and things like that. The directors and the producers will stay with the project for a very, very long time. And so it's been nearly 5.5 years, nearly 5 years now. And I'm excited and eager to get it out there now, to get it completed and finished, and move on to the next thing, move on to the next project. I'm excited to continue to hone my skills and hone my craft and just become a better filmmaker overall. You know what I mean? And I'm excited. So 5 year journey. You know, it's a long, long time, but I'm very, very proud of what we've been able to accomplish for sure. Super chats, Josh McKenna, $9.99. Are you a Tom Cruise fan? If so, do you have a favorite movie of his? I'm not a Tom Cruise fan. I really liked, I mean, I would say that I like I like him in War of the Worlds. I know that's not a thing that most people will say. I liked him in, what's that one? That one with Collateral. I loved him in Collateral. I love him in Rain Man. That's a fucking great movie. Yeah, like, I mean, you know, the Mission Impossible movies, obviously. Yeah, I'm a Tom Cruise fan, sure. You know, there's something about Tom Cruise I don't like, though, because of his Scientology shit. He seems too nice, too perfect, too friendly. But yet there's nothing wrong with him. Like, every time I see him in an interview, he's fucking charming and handsome, and he just seems like a guy you don't want to get angry. He's so nice. He's so nice and charming and friendly. It seems too good to be true. That's what I say about Tom Cruise. There's something creepy about him because there's nothing creepy about him. Do you know what I mean? Antonis Andriotis, $4.99. Dave, have you watched Braden Timmons' Halloween fan film? The one he's doing now? I don't think it's out yet. Or do you mean the other one? I think I did. Yes, when it first came out, I believe I did. And I thought he did a good job. It was a lot. I know he'd spent a lot of time on that. I think I saw it. I'm trying to remember it now. I believe I did. Yes, I believe I did. And if it's the one I'm thinking of, and he did a good job. Like, with the resources that he had and the experiences, you know, or the experience that he had, I thought he did a really good job, for sure. Antonis follows up, $4.99, says, is the actress from the beginning of Black Christmas 1974 who got suffocated still going to be in It's Me Billy Chapter 2? Yes and yes, 100%. Yep, for sure. Oh yeah, no. She's in it. Her husband is in it, Sean Sullivan, who was in Back to the Future 3, who was in Wayne's World. He's been in a ton of stuff. You know, more of a sort of a character actor, but he's been in a ton of stuff. And he's in it as well. And yes, it's, I'm incredibly disappointed, obviously, that we could not have had Olivia in the movie. But it really was out of our hands. We are very proud of how we handled the situation. We did everything we possibly could to make it happen. And unfortunately, it was out of our hands. And we did look at options to delay the shoot and push the shoot. But as I've said many times, we were locked in. When you are 2 weeks from going to camera, you're locked in. And that just means, like, things are booked, caterers booked, you know, hotels are booked, flights are booked. I mean, it's just, you're locked in. So to push the shoot, to push it, would have cost us thousands of dollars, right? It would have cost us thousands of dollars from, you know, stuff that we wouldn't have been able to get back. Now, we would have done it if we could have got a guarantee. Like, if her agent and her husband had said, listen, it's just a cold, she's fine, push the shoot to January, 100% guaranteed, let's do it. Well, we would have done it, obviously. But we talked about those things and they couldn't give us a guarantee. Well, because it wasn't a cold. It's not like she just got a cold and she was under the weather. It was a chronic thing. And I won't say what it is, but it's a chronic thing that she had been dealing with for quite some time. And so it was something that her health team had advised, you know what, unless they're shooting here in Los Angeles, we don't advise traveling. We don't, the stress of, and she's also agoraphobic for those of you that don't know. And that's not a secret. That's not something I shouldn't have said. It's out there. It's in her book. She's talked about it. She's agoraphobic. And so that's another thing, getting on a flight, flying on a plane, going to Canada in the middle of November. There's a lot, she would have totally done it, right? We were prepped to do it, but there were certain restrictions and certain things we had to have for her to come on board. There's a lot of things that we went through that you guys don't know about, because there's certain things that, are not necessary to talk about at this point in time. Maybe there'll be sort of a tell-all down the road, who knows? But it's one of those things where we made sure that she was comfortable, first class, her own hotel room, nice hotel room, well taken care of, what you do for this, for this kind of person. And it wasn't vanity. It was because she has these things that she suffered with her whole life. And so there were a lot of things at play. And so it is unfortunate. But there was nothing we could have done. We just could not get the guarantee. There was no guarantees that if we pushed the shoot, she would be able to do it. And then what? So let's say we push the shoot to February, let's say, right? And how much does that cost us? Maybe it costs us $10,000. Then what do we need to do? Well, we need to make that $10,000 back. Then we got to go to Indiegogo and we have to ask all of you guys for $10,000. Why? Because we pushed the shoot and we just lost 10 grand, right? This is not, and then there's no guarantee that our other cast and our crew will be available then, right? Maybe Greg, our DP, is like, oh guys, I want to do this, but I just booked a fucking feature in the middle of February for 3 weeks. I can't shoot it. Fuck, now we can't shoot it, And our caterer, believe it or not, said, I'm not available in February. She said that, I'm going to Australia for 3 weeks. So we'd have to find another caterer. So you don't just this is, again, these movies are real films. They're not just me and my friends hanging out and we can just, whatever, we'll do it whenever. That's not what, there are thousands of dollars at stake here, right? And so as producers, we have to think like that. We have to think about those things. The cast is all professional. The crew is, working professionals, right? And so we got to, we have to think like that. That doesn't mean that there aren't things that there aren't people we can rely on and favors we can ask for. Sure, of course. But at the end of the day, it's tough, man. It was tough. And so when we couldn't get a guarantee, her manager said, well, what about later in the spring or something? And I said, well, now we're cutting it close to be able to shoot the movie and meet our release date in October. But I said, can you give us a guarantee? They couldn't give us a guarantee. And I said, we can't do it. These are the breaks, right? This is, we're not just thinking on, we are the producers of the film. We're thinking as producers and what's best for the project at the end of the day, and what's best for the project is, well, we have to recast. We can't, if he could have given us a guarantee, we would have done it. But because then it would have been worth the $10,000 and we would have figured something out. But if we're not guaranteed, then we can't do it. Anyways, I've talked about this before, obviously, in the stream, but and I know I'm going off on a tangent, but it was disappointing. But everybody stepped up. Everybody stepped up, and Lisa Kovacs stepped up, and I think she did a tremendous job. And nothing else changes. The script never changed. The only thing that changed is, Olivia is out and Lisa is in, but the rest of the film remains the same, right? So it's not like, there was this amazing epic scene we were going to have that now we have to rewrite or something. I do understand that seeing Olivia on screen gives much more authenticity, much more credibility, much more cachet. I totally get it. I understand that, of course. And it's unfortunate that we have to, I totally get it. But I'm still very proud and very confident with the story and the film we've done. And Lynn Griffin is in it. And she's playing Claire's sister, Nancy. So that still gives it credibility. That still gives it authenticity. And that still makes it feel canon in a lot of ways. Do you know what I mean? And so, listen, there were people saying that our film felt canon when we didn't even have Olivia in it, right? You know, with chapter 1, because of the way that we crafted it, because of the way that we produced it, because of the way that, you know, it was executed. So hopefully you'll all feel the same way with this one too. But yes. Lynn Griffin is in the movie, 100%. I know I missed some super chats. Don't worry. Edward Nito, my Godzilla brother from another mother, a generous super chat, $20. What about that boat chase on the ocean? I got some Jaws vibes during that scene. For the first time during my many years as a Godzilla fan, I was rooting for the humans to destroy him. Godzilla was scary again. Yeah, that was a great scene. Yeah, I forgot to talk about that. That was a great scene for sure. It did remind me of the scene in Jaws where they're on the orca and, you know, they're bringing it into land and the shark has got, you know, the barrels and he's coming in and maybe it was, I don't know, maybe it was inspired by that. Who knows? Maybe it was inspired by that. I have no idea. But that was a great scene. I don't know if I was rooting for them to kill him, but I was definitely, I felt for the characters, which was great. You know what I mean? And, yeah, it's funny, Edward. I always have a soft spot for Godzilla, even in the Godzilla-centric movies where he's a bad guy. There's always a little soft spot for me, and I always feel a little sad when he dies. He, you know, dies, right? Because I always feel like he's misunderstood. And because there is, like, the inception and the creation of the character is, it's not personal. Like, it's not like I hate Japan, I hate Tokyo, so I'm going to kill them. He's a product of a situation. Do you know what I mean? And so I always, even though many films later kind of blur the lines with that, I always feel that in my core. So I always feel like, well, that's not his fault. It's like when, you know, a bear attacks a human. I was like, well, the bear is just defending its cubs. Like don't fucking shoot the bear. Like, unless it's a problematic bear or something and it's killing humans all the time. But I always have that little, but then how do you get rid of this gigantic lizard, right? I totally get it. But I always feel like, oh, he's kind of sad. It's gone. Okay. Like every time I watched Godzilla in 1985, I used to tear up at the end of that. For those of you that haven't seen Godzilla in 1985, you have no idea what Edward and I are talking about. We're having like a Godzilla, you know, brother moment here. But at the end, I'm always like, oh, it's kind of sad. And you know what? What's his name? The scientist, the doctor in Godzilla 1985, when Godzilla falls into the volcano, they're not happy about it. Like, that is a theme in that movie. They actually feel sort of sad. Like, you see them they're sad. Like, you see them take that moment in because they know that this isn't like we don't want to do this. We have to do it. Do you know what I mean? It's pretty cool. But yes, I get what you're saying. Edwardito follows up $5, says, so do I. I was sad for the same reasons at the end of G85. He was totally innocent. He was innocent, damn it. He was innocent. 100%, man. Yeah. I mean, you know, you get over it. Like I get it. I totally get it. It was really cool what they did. And seeing him regenerate, I was like, oh yeah. But there is that, like, again, some of the more cheesy Godzilla movies, you know, it's just cheesy, cheap fart stuff. But when you really dive into the layers of Godzilla, and that's what I love about the end of 1985, was you saw them take a moment, you know, and even Raymond Burr's speech. Like, I know Raymond Burr's speech is not at the end of the Return of Godzilla, the 1984 version, but Raymond Burr's speech is fantastic. Nature has a way sometimes of reminding man of just how small he really is. I'm going to paraphrase this. She occasionally throws up the something of our pride and carelessness and remind us of how puny we really are in the face of a tornado, an earthquake, or a Godzilla. The reckless ambitions of man are often dwarfed by their dangerous consequences. Godzilla, an innocent and tragic monster, has gone to Earth, which means he's gone into the volcano. Whether he returns or not, or is never again seen by human eyes, the things he has taught us remain. Now that is brilliant. And that's all, like, that's an American thing. It's very American too, but that's an American thing. That speech is not in The Return of Godzilla, even though the performances of them feeling sad and are. But that is what I'm talking about, right? Like, that is what I'm talking about, is that he's innocent. He's a product of a situation. He's ripping through the cities and breathing fire because he's a monster, not because he's like, oh, people, I fucking hate humans. Oh, hey, it's nothing to do with it. We are just at the mercy of that. The grizzly bear is attacking you because it thinks you're a threat. Its brain is not developed like a human. You can't rationalize with a bear. It's instinctual. It thinks you're a threat. You stumbled upon it. You scared it. It's got 2 fucking cubs. Is this fucking weird creature going to kill my cubs? I don't think so, bitch. And it fucking takes you and smashes you into the ground and either kills you or leaves you for dead. Because that's what the bear does. You know what I'm saying? And so, unless a bear is problematic, I'm always against shooting the animal. Always. Unless it's like it's become like like Jaws, it keeps showing up or something, unless it's developed a taste for blood and, for humans, which can happen. But if a mother bear is just protecting its cubs, fucking shoot the bear. Get the fuck out of here. And a lot of forest parks or forest rangers and things like that, they don't do that. But yeah, I'm totally with you, man. I'm totally with you. Edward says, he's a tragic character. I love that quote. I have it memorized as well. That and the music hits. Oh, the music at the end of Godzilla 1985. Again, very different from The Return of Godzilla in 84, the Japanese version, but fuck, man. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, it's fucking great. Oh, and the beginning of Godzilla 1985, which I think is the same as 84, if I'm not mistaken. But that, with the fire, fucking great. Godzilla 1985 is great, folks. Godzilla's a great character. Like I said, to the average moviegoer, he's misunderstood. And they think he's just this creepy lizard and this guy in a suit from the 70s cheesy movies, and he breathes fire and he wrestles other monsters, and that's what they think he is. And I understand that. I totally get it. But if you want to do your history on Godzilla, if you want to have a much bigger respect for the character, do your research on the inception of who Godzilla really is. And it will make you appreciate the more mature, the more mature movies like Godzilla -1, Godzilla 85, Godzilla 54. Like, it will make you appreciate those movies much more, because there's deeper layers there. All right, have I got all the super chats? Let me just jump over to the other screen. I believe I have. I know I said I was going to stop at 9, and then I went to 9:19. I was talking about Billy. Hey, you get me talking about Billy, and I just go off on a tangent. But it's good stuff. It's good stuff. Yes, I believe I have them all. I do. All right, folks, listen, that is going to do it for me here on this episode of Mcrae Live. Thank you for everybody who tuned in. I really appreciate it. Thank you to, of course, my great moderators, Frank Riker, Tap of the Shore, Darren Sands, Chris Baber, Cody Snyder, and Andrew Stevens. Thank you for doing what you guys do. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you to all the super chats that came in today, and those non-super chat ones I was able to get to as well. I appreciate that. And if you want to become a member here on the channel, hit that join button this Sunday night, well, tomorrow night, 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you want to get in on horror movie nights, you got to join level number 2. We're watching the 1986 classic House. That is tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for my level number 2 members. It's our next episode of Horror Movie Nights, where Mcrazies watch classic horror. What did we watch last time? Friday the 13th Part 4. We're watching House with George Wendt and what's his face? I forget his name. But anyway, we're watching that tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern. Check it out if you want to. But if not, have a great rest of your weekend, everybody. And I will talk to you all very soon. In the meantime and in between time, I will talk to you soon. Cheers.